these tombstones, headstones, whatever, that have seen its better day. You do a little cleaning job on them.
Well, we joined along with the Shining Honor Project, which is a really cool group. They started in Oklahoma, but now they're operating up in the Kalispell area. And it's really for two good purposes. One, they get developmentally disabled folks. They pay them to come clean and trim and beautify the headstones of veterans in the local cemetery. So they're creating productive work for them while honoring our veterans that have passed. And so we were there in Glacier Cemetery up in Kalispell. And you could not find a group of people that were more excited about getting a paycheck, doing something useful, and honoring those who have served.
Of course, we just went by Memorial Day. Let's talk a little bit about your travels around Montana, especially on that day.
Well, I started in Butte. We were over at the Civic Center. We had a great ceremony there. The gentleman who was the keynote had served in the military, and he gave a really heartfelt presentation. He named a dozen members of the military he had served with who had passed in some way related to active service. And that's what Memorial Day is all about, those that have given their lives. Really heartfelt, tremendous ceremony there at the Civic Center in Butte. Then I went up to Great Falls and was able to participate in a ceremony that honored the Montana Medal of Honor winners. And in particular, the most recent recipient was Travis Atkins from Bozeman. This man in Iraq just selflessly sacrificed himself to protect his comrades, and so that was the focus there. And it was a somber day of remembrance, and it's important that we don't forget. Memorial Day is not about barbecues, although we do have family time. It's really about remembering those that paid the ultimate price for our freedoms.
The VA Mission Act goes live on June the 6th. I was talking with the interim VA director on Wednesday about it. They're holding listening sessions throughout the state of Montana. One is in Billings yesterday. This talk about how important this VA Mission Act is going to be.
Well, the VA Mission Act is something we did just about a year ago. I am thrilled that it's going into place. The number one thing I hear from veterans across the state is they have trouble getting appointments for medical. They have to travel long distances. The Mission Act increases access to local providers because the reality is there's no difference between a military tooth and a civilian tooth. You ought to go see your local dentist. That's what the Mission Act does. We had the choice program. The truth is it just didn't work that well. It was hard to get pre-authorizations. Doctors didn't always get paid. We've taken the lessons from that, put it into the Mission Act. It rolls out here next month.
You know, this talk about something, people hear me in my office screaming every once in a while, and it's about these robocalls. I can't remember. You know, I was counting yesterday how many of these calls I got, and I tell you, it's just getting out of hand.
People have stopped answering their phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it rings off the hook.
Can I call you right now? Answer it.
I thought you just did.
Oh, okay.
The last year in the United States, there were 26 billion robocalls. That's up almost 50% in 1 year. We've been having some hearings on this. We had the FCC commissioners in front of us just in the last couple of weeks. I had a gal in Bozeman call me, and and the problem with these robocalls is they masquerade as your neighbor or your doctor or your local hospital in an attempt to dupe you or scam you into giving you credit card information or personal information. It's just not right. This gal in Bozeman, she got a call from her little brother. She looks at the phone, there's his number. Only problem is her little brother passed away 2 months earlier. It's like nobody should be subjected to that. That's why I've introduced the Stop Robocalls Act. And what it does is it allows telecommunications companies, they know which calls are legitimate and not legitimate, who's masquerading and trying to scam, and they should be allowed, which is not possible under current law, to just block those calls. It would just shut them down. And I think that's a good piece of legislation. We're getting some good bipartisan support for that, and I hope to push it over the finish line.
Now, the FCC, one of the commissioners are in town talking about broadband. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Brendan Carr is here, which I'll be on the radio here a little later this morning. Broadband is so important. We saw it, having run an internet business ourselves and traveling around the state. I was all across the High Line this week in Conrad and Shelby and Chester and Havre and Chinook. And
that could be a song. Just going back.
I've been everywhere, man.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And we have to close the digital divide. Broadband is not about internet access for shopping. It's about making sure we can provide health care in our rural communities. It's about making sure we can educate our kids. And it's about bringing jobs to our rural communities. I sit on the telecommunications subcommittee in the U.S. House. My number one priority is making sure Montanans have access to rural broadband. We have some programs. They're mostly working. We're getting bigger build out. We can do better. And I'll be pleased to talk with Brendan Carr, FCC Commissioner, later today about some of his ideas on how we can work together to get that done.
Let's talk about trade. Just announced that I think it is at 12 midnight tonight. China is now going to hit us with some tariffs, about $60 billion, I think. And then also the president is going to be doing some tariffs on Mexico, 5%. And it's just going to continue until it gets, 25%, something like that. And that's his idea of fighting, illegal folks coming in. Now, is there going to be, because a lot of people are being hurt now, especially our ag producers. And I've talked to a few of them, and they have to face this weather and everything else like that. Now they have to face this. So when is it going to be too much that, there's a breaking point for these farmers and ranchers?
Well, I'm with you. Nobody wins a trade war.
Yeah.
This is why I've been consistent with the administration. We need to bring these negotiations to a close. And you shared some of the bad news. Let me share a little bit of the good news. Just in the last week, Japan lifted tariffs on U.S. beef. That opens up a significant new market for our ranchers here in Montana. In addition, the president has renegotiated the U.S.-Canada-Mexico deal. There were some obstacles in the way. The administration in the last week removed tariffs on steel and aluminum with Mexico and Canada. He also promised not to put tariffs on automobiles. This really clears the way for the approval of the USMCA. There's some good stuff in there that would allow us to expand trade. And just to put it in perspective, I did a town hall here in the last 2 weeks. I asked Montanans, what is more important, getting a trade deal signed with Canada or lifting the tariffs on China? By a 10-to-1 margin, people said Canada is more important. And the numbers bear that out. Montana ag producers do 6 times more business with Canada than we do with China. So getting this USMCA done is extremely important. That's why the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi have been objecting, because they don't want to give the president a win. They had 3 objections in particular. With the administration's action to remove these tariffs, all the objections are removed. That's why last week I sent a letter to Speaker Pelosi and said, these were your 3 objections. They're gone. Let's get this deal done, because it's the right thing to do for our Montana ag producers.
The stock market's taking a little hit now too, and and I'm just looking at my 401k. And then I call up my stockbroker, and he says, "Scott, you don't want to know." And I'm just going, it's hurting a lot of people out there. And they said, the Trump tax cut, basically with all these tariffs and everything like that, it's going to far surpass what they made.
Well, I would encourage you not to look at the stock market on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I'm not.
If you look at it since December, it's a rocket ship. Yeah. I mean, it's doing great. Yeah. Your 401k is bigger. Retirements are bigger. I had a little town hall here in town last night, and somebody said, hey, I just want to say that this Trump tax cut has been a tremendous boom for me, my business, my employees, and at a national level, our economy is booming. Unemployment's at a 50-year low. Consumer confidence is at a 16-year high, and the strategy is not that complicated. We let people keep the fruits of their labor, and we've peeled regulations back.
Yeah.
And prosperity is never going to be created by government programs. It's going to get created in the private sector. And that's what's happening on a national level. It's happening here in Montana as well.
I lived up in the northeastern corner of the state, up in Plentywood for years. And, of course, there's one port of entry up there. It's Raymond. And I tell you, droves of Canadian folks would come down here and vice versa up there. And it seems like every 2 to 3 years, the scare tactic is thrown out there that some of these ports of entries are only going to be open like for 18 hours, 16 hours, whatever it is. And both you and Senator Daines got this done where that port of entry up in Raymond is now open for 24 hours. But there's still talk about getting some other these trade border entries closed for certain hours of the day.
Yeah, so we, Customs and Border Patrol made an ill-advised decision. We went after them. I spoke with the commissioner, John Sanders of CBP. They were good to their word. They came back and did the listening sessions. Mm-hmm. They didn't listen so good the first time.
Yeah.
They were mostly telling sessions. They came back, and then just late last week, they announced that they were reversing their decision, keeping the Port of Raymond north of Plentywood open 24 hours. That's a victory for Montana. These ports are critically important for our ag producers. Largest John Deere parts dealership, as I understand it, in North America is up in Regina.
Uh-huh.
You got a combine that's broken during harvest time. Doesn't matter what time of day it is.
Yeah.
It's like keeping that port open is like having access to 911.
Yeah.
And you don't always get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. But when you do, you need it to be there.
Yeah.
And we made that case. They heard us, and they responded.
Something else I'm really tired of. When is enough on this Mueller report? It came out. Robert Mueller went in front of the cameras on Wednesday, basically says done, When will the Democrats just drop this? It's deflecting from what President Trump could really do, because that must weigh on his mind a little bit, even though he says nah, and everything. It does. So when is it just going to go away? Well,
the Democrats thought they were going to milk this cow all the way through the election, and it turned out to be a steer. There's nothing there. I mean, the report is comprehensive. We spent tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, 2,700 subpoenas. They looked under every rock, and then they turned the rock over again. There's nothing there. We need to move on. And I just think Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have to get back to doing the business of the people. There's work to do to get prescription drug prices down, to create jobs, to expand our economy. And, Nancy, we need to secure the border to keep drugs from coming into our communities. That's where we should be focusing our energy now.
And getting back to the FCC commissioner, where's this meeting going to be held at?
We're going to be on Voices of Montana. I know you carry that here on this station.
Yeah.
At 9 o'clock.
Mm. And, is he going to be at any other speaking points?
He's been in the state traveling around meetings.
Wow.
I think he was up in Missoula, and I don't have his full schedule with me here, but 9 o'clock this morning, we'll be on your show here with Commissioner Brendan Carr of the FCC, having a dialogue about rural broadband, robocalls, and anything else that happens to come up. So
how high is that on their priority list, do you think, about the robocalls? But this talk about broadband, how high is that on their priority?
Oh, it's important. We had Jeet Pai and all of the FCC commissioners.
He's a neat guy.
A bright guy.
Yeah.
In front of our committee here in the last month, and I cross-examined Jeet Pai, the chairman of the FCC, on rural broadband. He assured me that this is a priority. And honestly, we have some good programs. The Universal Service Fund, which is the way we've gotten a lot of fiber buried around the state. But we have some voids, and we need to figure out how to fill those voids to make sure every Montanan has access to high-speed broadband.